Okay, so this week in WordPress, 3 articles caught my eye. I sent them ahead of time to Tim so that he could read them and we could talk about them. Article number 1, 5 ways to add recurring revenue to your WordPress business. This was published on Elegant Themes blog, our blog, and it was written by Joe Filan. Some of the advantages to adding recurring revenue that he listed were it helps you to build a more stable business, build longer-term relationships, spend more time with each client. And then he gave 5 ways to add recurring revenue. WordPress maintenance and support, offering advertising or PPC support or strategy, search marketing, or SEO as most people think of it, conversion optimization, and content and social media management. So Tim, what did you think of this article?
I think it was a great article. I'm very big on recurring revenue, which is what we'll probably end up talking about a lot today. I think most freelancers can relate to the phrase feast or famine, where
absolutely.
Your cash flow is going up and down. It's inconsistent, and some days or some months are busy months. Some you're straggling to try to find work. Mm-hmm. So I think finding ways to have recurring revenue can be really important for the cash flow. So I think every freelancer is a little bit different. Everyone brings a different set of skills to the table, a little bit different experience, and obviously every market's different too. So trying to figure out what are the best ways to provide value to a client on an ongoing basis to generate that recurring revenue. I'm not particularly huge on, for me at least, selling SEO services. I think it can get a little bit messy. There's a lot of education that has to take place with the client, making sure that they don't think that if they—
Tim, why aren't we number one on Google right now?
Exactly. So I typically don't do SEO services unless a client that I'm already building a website for really insists on it. Mm-hmm. But I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities with maintenance, providing backups as part of an ongoing package as well. I think that could be part of a recurring revenue model. But yeah, I think as a freelancer, finding ways to do that is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually something we spent a significant time talking about on the Marie Poulin episode. Mm-hmm. The idea of transitioning into digital strategy and including your design and development work within a more, robust or long-term business strategy or digital strategy approach so that you can have this kind of recurring revenue like, hey, let's create a huge plan that includes a lot of stuff. And then every week, month, whatever, I'll chip away at it and you'll just keep me on payroll or, on contract or whatever.
Right, definitely.
Which I think is a really cool approach. All right, let's jump to the second article, article number 2. Don't call yourself a developer if you don't code. This article was published on devwp.eu, and it was written by Mario Peshev. So the main thrust of this article, as the title would suggest, is that there is a big difference between being a developer in the traditional sense, someone who writes code, and what the term has kind of come to mean within the WordPress community, someone who builds websites with WordPress. And a lot of times that term is used regardless of whether or not that person actually knows and can write code. So he shares the Wikipedia definition of a developer. I'm sure there's other definitions out there that might have a bit more authority, but it'll work. Software development is the process of computer programming, documenting, testing, and bug fixing involved in creating and maintaining applications and frameworks involved in a software release lifecycle and resulting in a software product. The term refers to a process of writing and maintaining the source code, but in a broader sense of the term, it includes all that is involved between the conception of the desired software through to the final manifestation of the software, ideally in a planned and structured process. So this definition actually contrasts pretty starkly with how the term is often used in and around the WordPress community, where maybe the words or the terms WordPress designer or WordPress admin or WordPress maintenance might be a better fit. Some of the negative results, as outlined by Mario in this post, and I'm paraphrasing, are as follows. A massive misunderstanding for both clients and service providers in the WordPress community about what development actually entails. A pricing race to the bottom for WordPress development that doesn't really take into account the real costs of development. Poor site performance and security. Amateur code and plugins and themes, or just sloppy code. And then he thinks one of the big problems is a disenchantment of large enterprise level customers or potential large enterprise level customers who get burned working with people who bill themselves as something that they're not and kind of ruin it for everybody else. So I was wondering, Tim, what are your thoughts on this, and where do you fall in the terminology that he puts forward?
Yeah, absolutely. This was a great article. It is definitely a very relevant topic in the community today. I found it a little interesting that he gave the definition for software development when he's talking about the website development, because in my opinion, those can be very different things. Very different people that work on software than work on web. And I actually went ahead and looked up the definition for web developer. And let's see, and this is according to dictionary.com.
Okay, cool.
So it's a person or company that develops worldwide web software applications or that creates and maintains websites. And I think that's interesting. It seems like they've sort of evolved the definition to more of what a lot of people that call themselves developers actually do, which is creating and maintaining a website opposed to actually coding it.
Yeah. I thought the emphasis on source code was probably where he was going with the software thing, because we still have like the source code of our plugins, the source code of our themes, the source code of WordPress itself. And I think what he's getting at is like, if you're not able to write those things or work on those things, you don't have to be the person they chose to lead up a section of WordPress. I don't think he's trying to suggest that.
Right.
But I think he's just saying you need to be in that range. You need to be able to do that to be considered like an actual WordPress developer. That's his position. I actually tend to agree with that. I wrote an article not too long ago on Elegant Themes as part of it's called General Pricing Guide for WordPress. We've actually talked about it a few times on the podcast. And part of what I say in there is that there's this sort of animosity that I think exists between what I call power users. He called them WordPress super admins or whatever. Right. But I think there's a big difference between like a WordPress power user, someone who is really good with the tools that developers have created and can help non-WordPress users or people who are maybe novices with WordPress get up to speed or set up their website or set up and maintain their website. So these people are becoming more and more of a commodity within the WordPress community, but they're not developers. And I encourage people to make that distinction because, like he says, there can be some really negative side effects of having an inaccurately perceived or bloated community in which most of the people aren't actually what they're billing themselves as.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I can definitely understand that. For me, I'm kind of in between because I'm more than a power user or super admin, but I'm not going to be writing a PHP plugin from scratch. So HTML, CSS, I'm very well versed in. Editing PHP and kind of tweaking it and moving around code I can do. But again, I'm not a full-blown programmer.
Sure.
I try to stay away from calling myself a developer for that reason.
Right.
Usually like the verbiage on my personal website is more about creating websites because I do both the design and the development. I won't call myself a designer or developer, more of a website creator.
There you go.
And I think that definitely there is a problem with the naming of the position. But I think it's hard when the technology is moving so quickly and there's all these tools like Divi, for example, has almost created a profession for freelancers that can specialize in Divi. And I mean, that's kind of what this whole podcast is about.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
But again, I consider the bulk of those users, unless they're actually creating,
plugins.
Plugins to go along with it, or they're able to code, plugins and child themes, stuff like that. They're probably more in the power user category than in the developer category. And sometimes those things blur a little bit, but personally, I would always say err on the side of err on the side of caution. Like if you're not thoroughly versed in something, then don't claim that title. If you dabble in it, then just, then that can almost be like I'm a WordPress power user, but I also know a bit of PHP, or I also know a bit of this, or, I'm good with CSS. That then becomes a bonus as opposed to somebody going, oh, well, you're not really what you said you are you?
Right. Yeah, definitely. I see it being more of a problem for employers that are trying to hire the right person, the right developer.
And I think that's where he was coming from in the article. Is he was interviewing people and he was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? These people are not actually developers.
Yeah. I feel clients typically, from my experience at least, don't really care. They want someone that can deliver them a website, a solution.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're,
Regardless of how you get to that solution, they just
yeah,
want the end product.
exactly. And that's why so many people are able to use Divi and other WordPress products to create solutions for small businesses and so forth. So, but yeah, definitely an interesting article altogether.
Yeah, let's jump to the third and final article. It's called I Want a Clean Layout and Other Things WordPress Developers Are Sick of Hearing. So this article was published at wpmudev.org, and it was written by Brenda Barron. So as you can probably tell by the title, it's a collection of phrases WordPress developers are tired of hearing from their clients. And I'm guessing if we're going to use the definition or standards that we just talked about in the previous article, we should probably expand that to designers, super admins, power users, whatever. She listed 21 phrases. I don't think we have time to get into all of them, but I did set aside or note some of my favorites. The first one for me was, we need to rank high on search engines. And, I guess before we get into why these are kind of funny or these are exasperating, we should probably say this is not like to bash clients. It's just to say like, and actually that was one of the things was, the client is stupid was one of the other phrases that they're tired of hearing other developers say. And I don't think we ever want to get into the, clients are all dumb. They're not dumb. They have, they may not have the same level of expertise as you. But I think a lot of where these phrases come from are just the sort of gray areas where clients and the people who they hire are not necessarily on the same page. They're not, one party's not doing a good job of communicating, and there tend to be patterns in how that happens over and over and over again. And I think the idea of this article was to say, hey, we can relate to having clients say these types of things. Now, if you're a client, here's why that comes across wrong to the person that you're talking to. So another one of mine was, why do I have to pay more for that? And I think that's always funny because, it's a service and people get caught up on, wanting what they want for as little as possible. And they don't really think of add-ons as add-ons a lot of times. So they're like, oh yeah, I want this, I want that. And when it comes to asking for more, they just consider like, well, I already paid you, X amount. That should include any and everything that has to do with my website, even though it's going to take you 3 extra weeks to do or something along those lines.
Exactly.
Did any of the phrases stand out to you as things that you've heard or had to deal with or, had to educate a client on?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I could relate to pretty much all of them, at least a little bit, but I marked down a couple. The first one, this should be quick and easy. Oh, I think every designer, developer, freelancer can relate to that. Because from a client's perspective, you're just adding this one little feature on, but they don't realize what goes into that. I had a client recently that said, I sent over the changes. This should be really quick and easy. Let's get the site launched as soon as possible. And after looking through them, really what he wanted was for me to essentially redesign the whole homepage. And so it wasn't exactly a quick and easy thing. And I talked to him and we essentially came to a compromise and so forth.
So what do you do? Like, you said you talked to him and you guys came to a compromise. I mean, how do you handle when someone, I guess, I don't want to overstate this, but they drastically or grossly misunderstand what it is you do or what is required of you to do what they're asking? How do you approach that with a client? Because that's the actual taking like something practical away from this conversation, I guess. Yeah,
absolutely. At first I was extremely irritated and I wanted to call him and basically tell him like, there's no way that's going to happen. I took a day to kind of think it through and figure out the best solution. And it kind of goes to one of the phrases, the client is stupid. I had to realize he's not stupid. He's really smart. He's great at what he does in his field. And so it's just going to take a little bit of education on my part to show him, hey, what you actually brought up isn't necessarily quick and easy. It's a lot of little things. Some of them are actually bigger things that are going to take a lot more time. So, I want to make sure you're happy with the site and that this is something that you love and that you're proud to show off. So we can do those things, but keep in mind it's going to push the launch date back a couple of weeks probably. So maybe let's figure out what are some of the most high priority items that you want to absolutely have done right away, and then we can tackle the rest at a later time. And then after he heard that, he realized, oh, I didn't even realize that. You're right. Those things really aren't even necessary. I feel like when he was looking at it, he was almost like trying to come up with things for changes just to feel like he was doing his job right.
Right, yeah.
And then
he wanted to have more input, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then once we talked it through, he didn't even care about those other things. It turned out to be just a couple things that actually were minor. And so we're able to.
And I think that most clients are not, they're not actually inconsiderate. They're not actually, you know, obstinate or whatever. They're not actually trying to be a problem. And if you can talk to them calmly and explain things and be reasonable yourself, most of them will come around, like in your case, and they'll see what you're talking about. They'll understand what you're talking about because, again, they're not stupid. And
yeah, exactly.
99% of the time, you got there's always going to be somebody. But,
always exceptions.
Yeah. Another one that I liked was ASAP. Everything has to be as soon as possible. Everything's like, hey, can you get this to me right away? I know that we haven't been working together or whatever. Like, I've had clients, they'll email me. I'll ask them for some content, and 2 weeks will go by. I haven't heard anything from them. I'll have sent them an email. Hey, just checking up on that. Nothing. And then all of a sudden when they do get in touch, it's like, here's some stuff. I need it done right now, right today. It's like, well, you know, we got to plan these things out. We got a schedule to stay, or I have a schedule to stay to. I can't just jump off of other people's work to do yours today when, you know, I asked for it 2 weeks ago.
Right. Exactly. And then when everything's like that too, it's kind of like the old phrase, if everything's a fire drill, then nothing is.
Yeah,
you know, if you want everything now, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And I think, again, those are expectation setting conversations that end up being really helpful, particularly if you're trying to build those like long-term relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
One more for me, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
I think it was towards the bottom. I know you were the expert and advise differently, but I can relate to this one. And the quote I think of is a Steve Jobs quote, which he said at one point, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and then tell them what to do. We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a great quote for designers and freelancers and so forth, because that happens so much where a client hires us to do something, and then they put our skills in a box and say, okay, we want a great website, but we need you to keep our color scheme and our logo and everything, which doesn't look good. And you try to design around that, and you try to educate them, and it's a lost cause.
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of these phrases and a lot of just situations that we're talking about, almost all of them can be either avoided or worked through with conversations, like filtering conversations or expectation setting conversations before you even start working with somebody. So like Leslie Bernal's episode, an episode or two back, we talked about how to filter out problem clients. So to me, a problem client is someone who says something like these phrases, and then after you have a reasonable, intelligent conversation with them about, you know, educating them on your side of the equation, and they are like, no, you know, that's a problem client.
Yeah.
You know, that's a client who is not willing to work with you and be reasonable. So, but one thing yeah, exactly. So one thing that we talked about was how do you filter those people out before that they even become a client? And I think, you know, a big part of that is just recognizing, okay, these are certain each of these statements is a type of red flag. And you might call them like, you know, not quite red flags if you're able to work around them with a good conversation. But definitely anyone who, after that initial conversation, is not willing to back down from one of these statements is going to be probably considered a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. So I think that does it for This Week in WordPress. If you're interested in reading the articles that we discussed, YouTube viewers, you can check out the video description for links, and everyone else can find the show notes on our blog. Just go to the community category in the right-hand sidebar and check out the post for Divi Nation episode 15. Don't forget, if you're watching this video on YouTube or Facebook, take a moment to subscribe, follow, like, and/or share.